For decades, the Vikings came and went, fierce as storms gone with the tide. But in time, something changed. In Ireland, England, and Scotland, they stopped leaving. What began as winter camps turned into towns. The Norse built long houses, markets, walls. In Dublin, a Viking port grew, not just of warriors, but traders, craftsmen, and families. In Limerick and along the Isle of Man, they raised ships, bred cattle, and minted silver coins. In England, Norse control stretched across the east, and towns like York flourished under Norse law, becoming centers of commerce and power. These were no longer invaders. They were settlers, builders, rulers. Languages mixed, marriages crossed borders, and new identities were born. The axe had opened the door. Now the hammer and the hearth would build what came next. Not all Norsemen sought glory in blood or gold. Some sought freedom. In the mid-9th century, Norwegian chieftains, driven by exile, feuds, and the desire for land, sailed west beyond the known world. What they found was a wild island of ice and fire, Iceland. No kings ruled here, no armies guarded it, only deep fjords, smoking volcanoes, and vast green valleys. They carved out homes from the wilderness, built long houses, fished the northern seas, and raised sheep among the lava plains. And in time, they created something remarkable. In the year 930, Norse settlers gathered at a great plain and formed the Althing, a parliament of equals. No throne, no crown, only free men, and law spoken aloud. Iceland became not just a colony, but a mirror of Norse identity, independent, rugged, and fiercely bound by custom. Here, the sagas would be born, and a new kind of society would rise, far from kings, but never far from honor. They came as raiders. They stayed as rulers. In 865, the great heathen army stormed into England, not to raid, but to conquer. Town after town fell. Anglo-Saxon kingdoms crumbled. And when the dust settled, the Vikings didn't leave. They took land, they built towns, and they governed. The eastern part of England became known as the Danelaw, a vast region under Norse control where Viking law, language, and culture shaped daily life. In places like York, Norse chieftains ruled from strongholds. Markets boomed with silver, amber, and furs. Pagan rites and Christian churches stood side by side. This was not occupation, it was transformation. Norse settlers married local women. Children grew up speaking Old Norse and Old English. For the first time in England, Viking power was permanent, political, cultural. The sword had opened the door. Now, the law, Danelaw, held it open. For years, the rivers of France had run with fire. Viking raiders swept through Frisia and the Frankish coasts, striking town, burning churches, and demanding tribute. But one Viking chieftain, Rollo, wanted more than silver. He wanted land. In 911, after years of warfare, the Frankish king offered him a deal. Land for loyalty, peace for permanence. Rollo accepted. And so the Vikings, once feared invaders, became dukes of Normandy, the land of the Northmen. Here, Norse and Frankish culture blended. Pagan warriors married Christian women. Norse law merged with feudal rule. Longships gave way to castles. The Norse language faded, but Norse blood remained. And from this union would rise a dynasty that would one day conquer England itself. What began as raids had become a realm. Normandy was born, not with fire, but with treaty. The Viking legacy was not built by sword alone. It was also shaped by trade, fast, fearless, and far-reaching. Norse merchants carried furs, amber, and iron from the forests of Scandinavia. In return, they took back silver from the Caliphate, silk from Byzantium, and spices from the East. Their longships, not just warships, but merchant vessels, glided down rivers across Eastern Europe, connecting the Baltic to the Black Sea. Along these routes, they founded trading posts and cities. They crossed languages and borders. They met Slavs, Greeks, Arabs, and Persians, learning, bartering, adapting. In Baghdad, they were known as the Rus. In Constantinople, they became the Varangian Guard, elite Norse warriors sworn to the Byzantine emperor. Wherever they went, they traded not just goods, but stories, myths, and memory. From wind-swept fjords to golden mosques, the Vikings helped shape a connected world long before modern maps. They were more than raiders. They were a bridge between worlds. Some Viking journeys were born from conquest, others from exile. Around 985 AD, a Norseman named Eric the Red was banished from Iceland. But instead of vanishing, he sailed west, into ice-choked waters, chasing rumors of a distant land. What he found was vast, frozen, and fierce. A jagged coastline of glaciers and stone. He called it Greenland, hoping the name would attract settlers. And they came. A few hundred men and women from Iceland chasing land, freedom, and a second chance. They carved out life on the edge of survival. They built turf-walled homes, hunted seal and caribou, and struggled to grow crops in a place where summer was brief and winter was brutal. These weren't raids or conquests. This was endurance. For generations, the Norse lived on Greenland's coast, farming, trading, and praying. And though the settlements would one day fade, their spirit, bold, isolated, unyielding, became legend. Greenland was never easy, but for the Norse it was proof. The edge of the world was never the end. The edge of the world was never enough. Around the year 1000 AD, a Norseman named Leif Erikson, son of Eric the Red, sailed even farther west than his father, past Iceland, beyond Greenland, into the great unknown. What he found was a new land, Vinland, a place of rich forests, wild grapes, and wide rivers. It was warmer than Greenland, kinder, and for a moment in time, it held the promise of something new. Leif and his crew built simple shelters. They hunted, fished, and explored. This was the first known European landing in North America, nearly 500 years before Columbus. But the land was not empty. Conflict with the native peoples, isolation, and the distance from Greenland made the colony fragile. Within a few years, the Norse left Finland behind. Yet they had gone further than any of their world had dreamed. They had touched another continent. And long before maps or empires, the Vikings left their mark where no other European had set foot. Vinland, short-lived, but eternal in story. The Viking Age began with fire and steel, but it did not end there. Across England, Ireland, France, Iceland, Greenland, even parts of Russia, the Norse didn't just take, they stayed. With them came language, Old Norse words blended into English. With them came law, things, juries, oaths, Viking customs that still echo today. Norse settlers married local women, Children grew up between gods and crosses. Ships and shields gave way to farms and trade. In Normandy, the Norse became dukes. In Iceland, they wrote sagas. In England, their blood still runs through names, towns, and tongues. This was no longer just a Viking age. It was an age of transformation. The Viking world vanished not in defeat, but in evolution. It became Europe, and its legacy, carved in runes and remembered in legend, would outlast even the greatest kings.